What is up? In this video, I'm going to walk you through the 5 steps to launching a mobile app from 0 to 10,000, 100,000, a million users, and then lining up investor introductions, 20 plus investor introductions, and closing millions in investor money. Now, this roadmap, this process has been used by over 150 tech startups since 2016. And myself, I was recently doing research for our own company, talking to different consultants and coaches and agencies and experts about this process for our own kind of company. And I just found this video really valuable that they had made for startups like ours. And so I thought I would make one for startups that are coming to chat with Viral App Launch and just coming into our ecosystem, because once you understand the process, it makes things a little bit less scary. You kind of know like, hey, where I'm at in this process, like what stage I'm at as a company, and what the milestones are for moving to the next stage of the business. And I just think it helps to have like a firm, definitive model and process that anybody can follow to have guaranteed success with their app. So that's exactly what I'm walking you through today. Now, there are a lot of different type of apps out there. There are a lot of different type of tech startups, but these fundamental steps are ones that any tech startup can use to reach these goals. So with that, just one last note before I jump in. We are cash flow guys. So whenever I have done tech startups myself, whenever I've helped tech startups launch, I've always helped them make money while they grow so that they can grow profitably. So I think that's an important component of this, just to understand before we get into it, that we are shooting for revenue as quick as we can because we want this to be something that grows profitably. Ultimately, every startup founder is in this precarious position where if they're talking to investors, investors are going to express their interest, their preferences, etc. At least this is what happened to me when I was a tech founder. I was talking to one investor who was telling me, hey, take your fitness app to the B2C market. The other one was telling me, hey, go to B2B and monetize this with the healthcare system. So I had two investors pulling me in different directions, and I was really at a loss. Ultimately, that tug ended up kind of tearing my company apart because I was trying to please one investor and the other investor at the same time. I was chasing two rabbits, as they say. So I want to give you a roadmap where you're not going to be pulled in two directions, where you're going to be independent as a founder. Your company will be self-sustaining. It will be revenue generating. It can have its own, can stand on its own 2 feet, so that when investors come and present these forces, you have conviction in your foundations, and you're not going to be pulled off track by what any one investor or partner or anybody says. You're going to know the direction that you're heading in, and you're going to have a lot of clarity, confidence, and conviction in that. So that is my hope for this roadmap that I'm going to show you today, about how to scale your app from 0 to 10,000 users, to 100,000 users, a million users, and to raising millions in capital. So the first step of it is the overall roadmap. Every startup is going to go through these phases. The first phase is the alpha. This is where we're focused on product. This is where you are putting your product in market and letting users try it. So you're getting product feedback, you are hearing what real users have to say, you're testing usability, things like that, because you want to make sure that your product is stable enough that it can scale to 100,000 users. You don't want to have some key component of the app broken and have spent $100,000 on a launch, right? That's kind of the old way to do it, right? Like if you go back to my college education, to my master's in business school, like they're teaching you like, hey, pick your market and just launch like $100,000, $1 million in marketing and see what the cat brings in, essentially. That's not how we do it anymore. We can get data much faster than we used to. For example, with TV ads, you don't really like get a feedback loop. There's not like data that you get back from the TV. So it's really hard to see like what part of your marketing is working. These days, we can see it articulately. We can see the exact data of what's working and what's not straight from the get-go. And same thing with product, right? We can get product insights and data very quickly. So there's no reason to just like front load a bunch of marketing budget to make a huge splash if you don't know that, one, you're targeting the right audience, two, those users are actually people who love the app, and more importantly, three, it's a profitable audience. You only want to dump marketing budget in once it's profitable. And so that's why we focus on the early stage of getting the product right. So that's the alpha. So typically the KPI to exit this phase is a minimum of 1,000, a maximum of 5,000 users. So what you're doing during the alpha phase, completing your digital footprint, right? Make sure your website, your social media pages, your app store listings, all these are unified and consistent, and they're telling the right story, right? They have the right message. Next, you want to set up tracking systems. So this is where you're going to install Firebase, the SDKs for Facebook ads and for TikTok and Google, etc. And then, of course, launching your first campaigns to get those, initial users to come in. But what you're really looking for here is feedback from the users. And I'm going to go into more depth on each of these stages. So once you've figured out that the product is something that you're like proud enough to actually show to the world, then we move to the beta phase. The beta phase, so this would be like more of like a closed launch, and this would be more of an open launch, right? The beta. So the goal in the beta phase is to discover who your most profitable audiences are. For example, if you run a launch and you find you're targeting millennials, but it turns out that boomers are being acquired, on a per user basis of like 50% the cost of a millennial, you got a question to answer. You're like, hey, if I can pay half the price for a customer here, do I still want to target millennials over here, right? So that's the kind of stuff that comes out of the split testing process and the audience discovery, and that is the data that we get during the beta that will help you understand when to move toward a more scaling stage. So in the beta, the milestone that you want to hit is 10,000 users, right? Why 10,000 users? Because 10,000 users is enough data. It's enough proof and traction in your platform to show to investors, to show to yourself, to show to partners, etc., that this product not only works. Remember, in the alpha, we figured out that it works. In the beta, we're actually getting real users on there in a statistically significant way, right? So that means if we have 10,000 users, the data of user engagement, profitability, things like that, it will generally scale. So if you go from 10,000 to 100,000 to a million, those metrics generally hold. So we want to get to that first milestone of 10,000 users here, and that's why at Vyral App Launch we focus on getting those first 10,000 users, because that is the milestone that helps them raise investment for seed investors. It helps them start making money off the platform and doing all these things that will set us up for the sequential phases here. So during that phase, during the beta phase, you're doing split testing. So you're testing different messages, different creatives, different videos, ad graphics, ad copy, landing pages, checkout carts, things like that. Also, that's when we produce a lot of content. So you're going to want to see a bunch of different, graphics, videos, etc. You want to see how the audiences respond to those, right? Not only which creatives are winning, but which audiences are responding to those creatives. So you're basically taking the different variables and you're putting them together. So you might find out through this process that females 18 to 34 who live in coastal cities who are into yoga, that's my top audience. You could get that specific in the split testing process that I'm going to show you today. So you can know really specifically who to talk to, right? The way we talk to a female yoga instructor is going to be very different than, let's just say, a boomer who does construction, right? It's just two very different audiences. And that's why we're so focused on the audience discovery in that phase. So when you find that pocket audience, we call it, like the audience who's the most profitable for your platform, then we start to find product market fit, right? The goal here is to find which audience loves your product, put those together so that, of course, they become active users and then they buy it, right? Also in this phase, this is when you're going to start testing out your revenue and your monetization, because you want to know which users are willing to pay for your app. If boomers aren't willing to pay, but millennials are, okay, cool, let's invest more in millennial marketing, right? If it's the opposite, of course, we invest the opposite way, right? Next is the monetize phase. This is where we are moving to, so we understand in the marketing phase how much it costs to acquire a customer. Now in the monetize phase, phase 3, that's where we're figuring out what the customer is worth, right? So this is where we figure out what the CAC, the customer acquisition cost, in comparison to the lifetime value of that user is. So for example, let's just say we're acquiring customers for $50 and those customers give us $250 over the next few months. Their CAC to LTV ratio is 5, the CAC payback is 3 months, right? So we're trying to establish exactly how much it costs us to acquire a customer and how much profit we're going to make on it. It's basically an ROI equation, right? So during that phase, because we're making revenue at that point, we can start to invest more heavily in the marketing. And then we scale up. The KPI to exit this phase is a minimum of 10,000, a maximum of 50,000 users on the platform. And really, more importantly, the CAC to LTV ratio is established. At this time, we'll also make strategic pivots. So for example, if we want to change which audience we're targeting because we learned that another audience is very profitable or something like that, you can make those pivots at that time before, again, you invest too heavily in the marketing. During these early phases, we're not really investing that heavily in the marketing, maybe a few $1,000s a month in ads. But in these phases, once we start to scale up and the CAC to LTV is strong, then we really start spending. So you really want to make sure that you've made the right necessary pivots, you've got the profitability matrix worked out. Also during this phase, we look at the first-time user experience. We see for new users who are coming onto the platform, what percentage of them are going from download to registered user to free trial start or to purchase, right? So we are going to evaluate the first-time user experience. So what you want to do in that phase is look at the customer journey and the drop-off points and see, hey, maybe at the stage 2 of the onboarding, the user onboarding, people are dropping off a lot, right? And then you start optimizing that screen. So you want to make sure that your sign-up experience is smooth, easy, and fun for the users, essentially. And then once those pieces are in place, then you can launch the campaigns that are focused on getting sales. Also, during this phase is a good time to start talking to influencers and setting up those partnerships and relationships that are ultimately going to lead you to really good revenue down the road. And then phase 4, virality. This is where we start getting users to refer their friends as well as influencers and affiliates activated. So at this point, during phase 3, we've started to invest more heavily in getting users. And I will go over budgets on this presentation too, so you can figure out what it costs to achieve, 10,000, 100,000 users. But during the virality phase, we're trying to multiply the number of users that come in. So instead of a 1-to-1, we pay $10, we get a customer. We're trying to increase the ratio, right? Or increase the growth rate exponentially. So not addition, not 1 + 1, but 2 × 2, 3 × 3, etc. So we get the influencer campaigns set up as affiliates, so they have incentives to send users to the platform. They get rewarded for it. And then on the back end, we set up referrals. So the power users turn into referring customers. So the people who love your app start sharing it on your behalf. And then you got the virality on the front end and on the back end of the app. So during phase 4, the milestone to exit this phase is typically 100,000 downloads. And that is usually enough data, users, and sales to go to raise a Series A round, the investment. But also usually at that point, you're profitable and you have funnels and campaigns, launch strategies that are generating 3, 4, 5 users for every 1 user that you acquire. And so you can start to scale up to 1 million users quite quickly after that. During that phase, we also take a hard look at the profitability of the app. So we want to make sure that the pricing and packaging is the right arrangement. So that's, is it best to charge users quarterly, monthly, weekly, annually, lifetime, etc. And then, is it $3 a month or $5 a month, etc. And then we move, after we have checked all these boxes and we have hit 100,000 users, then we move to the capital raising phase. And at this point, I'm going to show you how to build a Dream 100 list of your target 100 investors. I'm going to show you how to build your pitch deck, and I'm going to show you how to outreach on LinkedIn, email, and Twitter so that you can set up, campaigns that generate investor leads where they're coming to you. Also, I'll show you how to qualify those investors so that when you actually want to go close a deal, you make sure that they're a good fit, they can add more than just money to the equation, and so on. So that's a quick overview of the 5 stages of taking an app from 0 to 10,000 to 100,000 and to 1 million when it comes to your launch process. So I'm going to move into a little more detail here now. So before we start anything, we always do a roadmap. Now, this is, however you want to go about this. If you want to come up with your own marketing strategy, be my guest. I just recommend that your marketing strategy is determined before you go and actually start spending dollars on marketing. You want to do research into your platform's digital footprint. You want to look at key data points on your company as well as external research. So looking at competitors, looking at historical data from past campaigns that, for when we do it, we look at all the past campaigns that we've launched, which is over 300, and then come up with an actual marketing strategy plan based on that. This is like your playbook that will be needed for every step of launching to 10,000 users and beyond. So that will be budgets, timelines, marketing channels, which audiences to target, what creative angles to go with, what messaging, what positioning, how to set up tracking and analytics, how to set up data dashboards, all that kind of stuff. So the roadmap really is this is your guidebook for your app launch, right? So everybody should do this. Everybody should take some time to think and actually figure out which audiences do I want to target? What kind of messaging do I want to test against these audiences? How much do I want to charge for my product? What channels do I want to distribute this on? Am I going to be on LinkedIn or am I going to be on, Facebook and Instagram or TikTok, right? You got to make those decisions and research those things before you get into it. For example, like if you have a high risk product like telehealth, right? We have a couple telehealth campaigns going on right now. Those products are restricted categories. So it's very hard to run ads on Facebook ads for that. So that's the kind of thing that you figure out when you're doing your roadmap research or your marketing plan research is like, hey, am I going to be up against compliance issues? Am I going to have really high costs on Facebook because of some reason or another? So it's really important to do this due diligence before you launch. I know it seems, could be a little bit daunting for a newbie, but use the resources at your disposal. We have a bunch of resources on this for free that you can use. You can also, go into ChatGPT and ask that for help. You can just hit Google and, start digging around. You'll be surprised at how valuable the information is that you find and how much it builds. It'll paint a picture around your app. So instead of just kind of going into this blind, you'll have a really clear picture. And that's why I like this illustration. It's clear steps, like the alpha and the beta and whatever. Just you want to have very clear steps that you're going to follow. And that's part of why I'm making this video for you, is so that you have a very clear roadmap from 0 to 10,000 to 100,000 to $1 million to investment, right? So definitely don't skip over the planning part. There's a quote that I love, or it's like a rule, right? The 20-80 rule, not the 80-20 rule. The 20-80 rule states that the 20% you do at the beginning of the project determines 80% of the project's success. So if you don't do your relatively small amount of work to do the proper planning, you're basically setting up your launch for failure. So do your due diligence, lay out a plan, do your research, hit us up if you need more information and resources on this. We're happy to help. We have a ton of free resources out there around this. So once you have your roadmap in place, you have your plan, really the milestone for exiting the planning phase is you can confidently say, hey, this is my budget, this is my timeline, these are my goals, and here's how I'm going to get there. Here's the marketing channels I'm going to use. Here is the messaging, the positioning, the audiences that I want to target, the avatars, all that kind of stuff. And once you have that, then we're going to move to the alpha, right? So the alpha, like I mentioned earlier, this is about optimizing your product. This is where we're getting your product ready for the world. So I'm not a perfectionist. I don't believe in perfectionism anymore. I used to be. Being a creative, it was, I would say almost like a chip on my shoulder. I wanted everything to be perfect that I put out there. But I've learned that ugly landing pages obviously, or maybe not obviously, but in our world, obviously, ugly landing pages often convert better than pretty ones do. Why? Because content matters more than aesthetics. Aesthetics obviously help, but we're not trying to make your product so over polished that it's hard to work on later. You want to get it out into the world when its base functionality is working, right? So if it's a rideshare app, somebody can download the app, register, request a ride and get a ride, even if it's clunky and ugly. People are more concerned with getting the solution rather than having a sexy app. And for the most part, a lot of people who are new to your platform are not going to understand your app in the first place. So you actually want it to be simple with fewer functionalities so that users can get to their outcome faster, get what they came for, which is, hey, I'm looking for a taxi to pick me up, or whatever that, solution that your product offers. So the goal here is to establish your product market fit. This is putting your product in market, getting feedback from users, making sure that it works, making sure that they like it, and taking that feedback and making any optimizations that are necessary to your app. And then, of course, getting feedback from users and, adjusting your positioning and your app store listing and your product content, all of that around what customers are saying. If you are not getting any feedback, or if people are not downloading your app at all, that's actually a bigger problem, right? You're not getting any negative feedback, but also you're not getting any learnings. You're not seeing how you can improve your product. So the product, the alpha phase is really, really important in my opinion. Don't skip over this part. So the things that you're going to want to do in the alpha phase, first of all, you want to unify your digital presence. So this is getting your App Store listings to look unified across Google and App Store. This is doing conversion rate optimization. So making sure that the content is structured in a way where when somebody comes to your App Store listing page, they want to download. Or if you're using a landing page, obviously you want to use that, structure that landing page in the same way where it inclines people to sign up for your app. So the structure that you're going to want to follow when it comes to App Store listing optimization, you're going to want to, the first, in the body content of your App Store listing, you want to have a hook, something that captures their attention, gets them excited. State the problem, present the solution, provide social proof. So this is like awards, press mentions, celebrity endorsements, things like that, any kind of social proof. And then you put your call to action at the bottom. So that's like the body content of your App Store listing. And then in the header, you're going to want to put, let's just say, this app that we have on screen, like Flux, personal finance management, right? So you want to put that right into the title. But in the title, so that the name of your app, Flux, let's just say is your app. Let's just say it's, budgeting for everyday people or something like that. You want to put that right into the title. So it shouldn't just say Flux. It should say Flux, easy budgeting for everyday people. And so you present the product and the solution right in the headline. And then you also want to make sure that there are keywords, search keywords worked into the headline content. So the title of your app should include a search keyword. So let's just say you go on to Google Keyword Research Tool, or you use a tool like Sensor Tower to do keyword research. Let's just say I have this budgeting app, right? I'm going to go into the Google Keyword Research Tool and I'm going to put the search term budgeting app. And then I'm going to look at all the search queries from people who are searching for that on Google or for the App Store, and I'm going to see what terms they're searching for. So let's just say the most popular keyword there comes up as consumer finance, right? So it would be Flux, consumer finance, and budgeting, right? So that whenever somebody searches for that popular term, it is right in your title of your app. So you are very highly likely going to show up as soon as you get that search, right? And that will make you show up more in the App Store for free, right? You'll get free impressions on the App Store. You'll get free downloads. This is the easiest hack that founders can do to get free users. It's your ASO. So your headline has, or your title of your app, we call it an H1, or your header, you're going to put the name of the app, a keyword, and then the description, right? So it's going to be like Flux, personal budgeting app. Let's just say personal budgeting is the keyword that's most popular. Oh yeah, one other thing, when you're doing keyword research, you want to look for keywords that have high search volume. So let's just say tens of thousands of people are searching for this term per month, and then low competition. In Sensor Tower, in Data.ai, all these platforms, Google Keyword Research Tool, they show you how much traffic there is and how much competition there is. And they also show you the estimated value per click, so you can see like generally how valuable it is. So if you can rank for that term, you could be saving $5 every time somebody clicks by not paying for ads, right? So you're going to look at the highest search volume keywords that relate to your business the best, and then the lowest competition. That's what you want to get. High search demand, low competition. And then you want to weave those keywords into the content, the header, the subheader of your App Store listing, and the body content. Or of course, if you're doing it for your website, then, same goes. It would just be for web. So the App Store listing and App Store optimization is important. That structure, remember, hook, problem, solution, doubts and credibilities, social proof, etc., call to action. Hook, problem, solution, doubts and credibilities, social proof, call to action. That's how you structure the whole content of your App Store listing. Now you can also structure, if you're doing a SaaS app and you have a landing page, you can structure the content in the same way. Header is the hook, subheader is the problem statement, and then the H3 would be like the solution statement, and then you could go into like the first fold would be like the hook, second fold, content on your landing page would be the problems, like, hey, if you're dealing with X, Y, and Z, and then the third would be the solution, fourth would be social proof, fifth would be call to action, right? So you can structure your landing pages in the same way. So I know I went kind of deep on that, but I feel like that's something that's really valuable when it comes to preparing your app for launch, because if you make those optimizations, you will take your conversion rate on your App Store listing page from like 5% up to like 20% just by doing those optimizations. Also, one other thing to do when you're optimizing your App Store listings, think about your images, the App Store images as a customer journey, right? So you start here and you finish here. Let's just say you have 5 images. Same thing, hook, problem, solution, social proof, or you could do product features and then social proof and then call to action as the last image. And it's ideal if you can make the design of the 5, 6, 7 images that you use in your App Store listing, have them be woven together. So maybe put the phone like sideways like this so it covers, multiple images, so that when people look at it, they have to look to the next image to see the rest of the story. So then they start swiping. So you'll see your App Store conversion rate go up a lot by doing that. Once you've figured out the content for your App Store listing and for your landing page, then you're going to apply that content to your social media pages. Let's just say your Facebook fan page, your Instagram page, and your website, and make sure that it's all aligned, right? That way, whenever somebody sees an ad and they're like, hey, I don't know if I want to download this, then they can go to your Instagram page and it'll all look uniform. It'll tell the same story, whatever. It'll look legit. Same thing, they go on Google, they find your website, the message is going to be aligned, right? And of course, if they Google you after that and you put the keywords into your header content, then of course you'll show up when they search for it. So you just want to make sure that your whole digital footprint is unified. What we typically do for an app launch, we make sure that the App Store listings are all cleaned up. We do the home website, landing pages if it's a SaaS, so funnels, etc. And then we make sure that there's one other thing. App Store listing, landing page, and social media pages, right? Your Instagram, your TikTok, whatever channels you're going to use. I don't recommend doing a whole bunch of channels. I'll probably just start with Instagram if you don't have any set up. Next, you're going to go to the tracking setup phase. So this is where you want to install analytics SDKs so that you can monitor how many installs you're going to get. You can see the user behaviors and the engagement in the app. Now, I recommend that you use Firebase and then the Meta SDK. The Meta SDK allows you to run ads, and the Firebase SDK is basically Google Analytics. It shows you all the analytics on your products, on your app for free, really handy, and you can see user engagement, retention, all that kind of stuff. Next, during the alpha phase, you want to start your first paid media campaigns. So I recommend running on Meta, Facebook, and Instagram first because it gives you the most data, the most granular, and it's the easiest to use, and it gets you the best results. After we've figured out what campaigns are performing the best on Meta, then we can move it over to Google and YouTube. Google and YouTube is really strong as well, very, very good for cash flow apps that want to get a profitable CAC to LTV ratio. TikTok is also good, but there's a lot going on there. It's talking about being banned and all this stuff. So we generally launch that third. So once you get those first campaigns live, what you want to do is go into your tracking and analytics setup. So this would be Firebase in this case, and you're going to look at user insights. You're going to see what age, location, and behaviors are showing up in your top customers and audiences. You can also see this in your Facebook ads. You'll see what age, gender, and location people are, and that will help you understand who your best users are. For example, if you're getting like a $5 install for male and a $2 install for female, maybe we should be targeting more females with your app. Why? Because it's 2.5 times more profitable. And so you're going to want to run those initial campaigns until you have 1,000 users at least. Remember, 5,000 users is optimal, but 1,000 users is enough because it's statistically significant data where you can look at the user insights and you can say, hey, we have enough data to prove that this is a real actual fact, right? This audience prefers our app more. And so that will get you through the alpha phase, and then we move to the beta phase. This is where we're talking about finding your perfect customers. This is the marketing aspect of your company. We're going to not only discover the optimal messages and audiences, but we're going to start maximizing profitability. Remember, your outcome here, you're going to be shooting for 10,000 downloads and establishing your customer acquisition cost. So what you're going to do in this phase is, now that you got your first Facebook campaign built, you're going to launch split testing campaigns on Facebook ads. So this is where we're going to try different messages, different graphics, different videos, etc., until we figure out which users are most engaged with the app. For example, let's just say we run a split test with 10 different graphics. Sorry, one ad graphic with 10 different messages on it. So you put 10 different hooks. So we can compare hook 1 against hook 2 against hook 3, and we can look at the click-through rates of those and compare them. Which ones are the strongest? Which ones are people clicking on the most? Maybe message 2 and 5 are the most engaging to people. And you just let that run until you have statistically significant data, and you can see which users are ultimately going to become your best users. You want high click-through rates, low cost per install, low cost per customer acquisition. By running this split testing, if you do 5 rounds of split testing, you can bring down your customer acquisition cost by 80 to 90%. So that is massively more profitable, of course, than not doing it. So the way that you do that is you want to create a fishbowl of different content, right? You want to have graphics, videos, etc. Like I said, it's great to make one graphic with 10 different messages on it to test messaging. Next, it's good to test different like visuals. So you could do like red versus yellow, or you could do green versus blue, etc., and see what more, the users are responding to more in the ads. After you go through 2 to 5 rounds of split testing, you'll be able to see which ages have the lowest cost per acquisition, which genders, which locations, which creatives, which messages, which videos, etc. So at this point, like I said, you can bring down your customer acquisition cost by like 90% by doing this. And this is how we identify the perfect customer, using that data from those early campaigns. Once we have established the ideal customer profile, your ICP, then you want to start expanding to other platforms like Google Ads. So you're going to want to run this initiative up until you hit at least 5,000, ideally 10,000 downloads. So once you've established, hey, I'm getting customers for $5 each, they're worth $10, then you just start investing heavily into the ads. So at that point, you'll figure out what your customer acquisition cost is, what your conversion rate is, and you'll also understand your audiences and messaging insights. So like, what messages do people respond to? What graphics did they like? What videos, etc. We just launched a new campaign internally today, and the graphic and content that people loves is like not. I would have never thought. I mean, to me, it just looks kind of cheesy, but people love it, right? The hook is experience growth like TikTok. So we've helped launch TikTok, so a lot of people love that ad, right? And that gets us great results. So not what I would have expected out of the ads, but hey, that's what's working. So we ramp it, right? During this phase, the typical marketing budget that's required is $10,000 to $15,000. It's probably closer to $10,000 for more companies, but you want to have some buffer built in. $15,000 comes out to about $3,000 to $5,000 a month. $3,000 to $5,000 a month. Usually, we spend like $2,000 in the first month on ads, maybe $3,000, and we can get profitable. Like if you're running this process that I just showed you, you can probably get profitable in about 1 to 2 months of runtime with your campaigns. Okay, cool. Yeah, so I wanted to make sure the retention marketing wasn't in this part. All right, so at this point, by the end of this phase, not only will you understand who your target customers are and like what they love about your app, but you will understand how much it costs you to acquire them and what they're worth. What's their lifetime value and their average order value. So after that, then you move to the monetizing phase. This is where you want to focus on boosting the conversion rate of your app. So now we're getting the right customers. We have the right marketing funnel that is generating a lot of traffic and a lot of quality users. It's time to improve the conversion rate of the app and maximize profitability. And then bring that out into the long term by doing customer engagement and retention marketing. So the outcome to exit this phase is going to be getting your CAC to LTV profitable. Remember, the milestones are less dependent on the numbers and more dependent on like the KPIs, let's just say. I don't care if you got 10,000 or 100,000 downloads. If you don't know what your customer acquisition cost is, you got to go back to phase 2 and figure it out, right? So don't get ahead of yourself. Don't go start overspending on marketing until you really understand what your customer acquisition cost is. And then when you come into the monetize phase 3, then getting that LTV, figure out exactly how profitable it is. So what you're going to want to do in this phase are work on reducing your customer acquisition costs. That is more split testing like we talked about earlier, and then figuring out what the lifetime value is. So at this point, you've been running your app launch for 6 months, and you start to see how long people have stayed as customers. Did they stay 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, etc. Now you've got enough timeline where you can see what the lifetime value is. And then you can start working on optimizing it, right? Let's just say your lifetime value is $20 and you're paying $10 per customer. Hey, maybe we want to get that up to $30. How do we do it? And I'm going to show you that right now. So conversion rate optimization. We're going to want to look at in-app, how do we make more sales, right? When are we showing the premium sign-up prompt? When are we showing promotions like, hey, buy now and get 7 days free? When are we going to say like, hey, new year, new you, sign up for our new year promotion, whatever. You need to figure out when you're going to put those sales prompts into the app. Ideally, what you want to do is you want to put the sales prompts right after somebody has gotten big value from the app. So after they've gone through their first customer journey, like let's just say you have a ride sharing app and they've called their first car and they rated it a 5-star experience, that's a great time to be like, hey, upgrade to premium for $3 a month or $5 a month. And that is where you're going to do your in-app conversion rate optimization. So this is where you want to look at what messaging is getting the highest conversion rate. So if I talk about, a New Year, New Me promo versus a Valentine's promo, which one is converting better? Or if I just do an evergreen type of promo, like, hey, sign up and get 30 days free if you buy an annual membership versus, 3 days free for a weekly membership, which of those two converts better, right? And so you're going to want to look at that data and figure out exactly what's driving the most profitability in the app. And then importantly, I want to go down to retention here. You're going to want to set up a 30-day email, SMS, and push notification sequence so that after somebody signs up for your app, it's not like they just like sign up and they're all excited and then it falls off. You need it to have retention marketing. So after day 1, they're going to get a message. After day 2, they get another message. And in this retention marketing sequence, this is where you want to be reselling them on your platform. So typically what I like to do with the 30-day retention sequence, I spend the first week doing onboarding. So the first 5 to 7 days, it's all focused on teaching them how to use the app and how to get value from it. Again, you can use the hook problem solution format. So first email being a hook, get them excited. Second email, talking about the problem that your app solves. Third, showing them how to solve it with your app. Fourth, talking about case studies, testimonials, social proof, etc. Fifth, call to action. Maybe you can put like a premium sign up or sign up for a paid service in that 5th, 6th, 7th email in those first week of your onboarding emails. And then after that, you want to give them inspiration. So, hey, put a picture of your cat doing XYZ or, request a ride, whatever. Remind them to use your app. They will forget about your app if they've never used it before. The retention marketing is really important to remind them to come back to your app. So push notifications, email, and SMS. That's what you're going to want to set up for retention. And you will see not only your user retention go from like a curve that looks like this to being like more consistent, like, 30% day 1 retention, 10% day 30 retention, etc., up from like, 10% day 1 retention. Most apps, when they launch, they have like 5 to 10% day 1 retention. So don't feel bad if that's where you're at. You just need to set up some retention marketing. During this phase, you also want to continue to do split testing, right? Fine-tuning the ads, the audiences, the channels, etc. And of course, you can also split test those emails and SMSs too. You can see what messages are working best. But since you did all that split testing earlier and you looked at all the messages that were winning in the ads, you can take those learnings over to the email and the push and the SMS notifications so that you can use already validated and proven messaging. During this time, I put an advertising budget of $10,000 to $20,000. If my app's profitable, I'm going to spend a lot more than that. I'll spend $100,000. Why? Because every dollar you put in turns out $2, right? So this is kind of like a minimum budget, especially if, for some reason you're not profitable at this stage, you need to do a lot of work. But if you are getting profitable, I just recommend spending as much advertising dollars as you can and getting the most customers that you can. Why? Because it's just, you can never recreate profitability, right? As soon as something's profitable, I always start scaling it, and I never turn off something that's profitable. So that's the monetize phase. Now let's talk about virality. Now, most people come to our company wondering about virality, and the truth is we don't do virality until the later stages. Why? Because most companies just aren't ready for it. Like, you shouldn't be focused on multiplying your user base if your users don't love your app. If you're not making money on the users, don't worry about getting more users. Worry about making money on the users that you have, right? Make sure that they love the app and that they're willing to pay for it before you go invest in virality, because this part is what takes a lot of grit and work. And so you want to make sure that the product markets itself, essentially. So this is where we're focused on turning your users into your best marketers. So turning everyday users into power users, creating a K factor. The K factor basically means the multiplication factor, right? For every 1 user who comes on, can we get them to bring 2 users of their friends on? That's the K factor. So we're ideally targeting at least a 1+ K factor. So anything above 1.0, so let's just say 1.1 would be every 10th user brings on a friend. That's like kind of a weak K factor, but 1.5, 2x K factor, you're going to want to get users to be sharing it with their friends. So the first thing is, of course, to establish that K factor. Want to figure out how many people are referring their friends. If you have a refer a friend product or program in your app, great. If not, think about it, right? Because you're paying to acquire these users, whether you're hosting events or whether you're buying billboards or however you're spending money to acquire users, or whether you're just using like Facebook ads or something like that, or if you're just posting content and spending time doing it, it costs you money to acquire those users. It costs you either money or time, and those two are basically the same thing. So you want to make sure that those users are referring their friends once they come into the app. And this is where we build the referral programs. So you want to incentivize the users. So the best way to incentivize the users, in my experience, is like, let's just say you have a product that has a $10 per month premium. You can tell your power users, hey, if you invite 3 friends, I'll give you a month of premium free, or I'll give you some other in-app bonus. And you use stuff that is free to you to give away, but valuable to the user. So that's why giving away product features and stuff like that is great for referral programs. For example, Dropbox gave away a gigabyte to the person who shared it and a gigabyte to the person who received the share, right? Uber offers $20 to the person who shares it and $20 to the person who signs up. Obviously, you don't want to pay $40 per customer acquisition like Uber does. They were heavily invested at that point. But you want to give away stuff that is valuable to the user, free to you, right? So bonuses, rewards, free premium membership, maybe VIP access. Maybe they can get access to higher level communities in your app, or maybe they can get access to, I don't know, exclusive features, etc. So on the back end of your app, you have the referral program, and on the front end, you have the influencer activation and the affiliates. This is where you're going to go to key influencers in your category. My favorite is to go to YouTubers who have a lot of subscribers and good view counts, right? Anybody who's a YouTuber is generally going to be an affiliate, right? That's how they make money, is they get paid to promote other people's products on their YouTube channel. And YouTube's long format, so people generally have a deeper relationship with them than they would, say, an Instagram influencer. So I prefer YouTubers personally when it comes to setting up affiliate campaigns. And basically what you want to do is you want to select you want a list of like 10 to 20 target affiliates, and you want to do your first launch with about 4 to 5 of them. So a small handful of them, do a little test launch, see who gets you the best results. Remember, this is just the same kind of split testing we were doing earlier. You have 5 different audiences from 5 different affiliates or influencers. You're going to test how A, B, C, D, and E compare against each other. It's that simple, right? Let's just say you ask them all to send out an email to their email list or to make a YouTube video, and you can compare the metrics. You give them each their own individual tracked link. You just get like a referral link from Bitly or something like that, or you can use a more robust referral system. But we use high level, which is great. Go high level, but of course, you can use whatever you want. A lot of people actually build referral programs and affiliate programs into their app. If you have that, great. If not, just use a Bitly link. So you want to get those 5 influencers to post about you. You're not going to pay them like $2,000, $5,000 up front. What you're going to do is you're going to say, for every customer who spends $100 on my app, I'll give you $50. Or for every customer sign up you get, I'll give you $150. Whatever your business economics are, you want to have them pay your customer acquisition costs. Most likely with affiliates, your customer acquisition cost is going to be lower than with ads. Ads are pretty expensive and competitive these days. So if you can get affiliates to post about it, it doesn't cost them anything. They just post to their audience, right? They just include you in a video. So it's free for them, valuable for you, and ultimately you can pay lower customer acquisition costs that way. And also you only pay the affiliates once they bring you business. So it's not like you're investing before you actually get the customers. With any other kind of marketing, you have to invest before. With affiliates, you invest after you get the customers. So I really love those programs. So on the front end of your app, you want to have affiliates. Let's just say 5 different affiliates who are posting to their audience of 100,000 each, bringing a ton of customers into your app. And then on the back end, turning those, because remember, we optimize the user experience, optimize the product, set up the refer a friend program. Now they have a product that they love that's making you money, and they're sharing it with their friends. So you got affiliates on the front end, referrals on the back end. And then at that point, when you have that viral effect, when you're creating 1, 2, 3, 5 users out of every customer that you acquire, then you can really juice up the ads. That's when it becomes ultra profitable on your campaigns. And this is when things really start to explode and get you to that 1 million user mark. There's a campaign that we launched a year or so ago that was for like a social language learning app, and we got it to 1 million users in 6 months. So, and I think we had 15 affiliates on that campaign, a few $100,000 in ad spend, and yeah, hit 1 million users in 6 months. So it's all very attainable, all very real. If you just follow the steps, if you just hit these milestones, then you will achieve success with your app. All right, lastly, let's talk about the capital raising. So the way a lot of people raise capital, and the way I raised capital when I was an app founder, was I went to investors, I looked for introductions, I asked, I pitched. Huge pain in the ass. Most investors, my experience was this. They would tell you that they're going to invest, and then they would defer. until you were desperate. And then they get more leverage because you're burning through your capital, but you're getting more users and they're getting more data on your platform. So their incentive is actually to wait as long as possible before they'll invest in your app. So you're going to see investors kicking the can down the street. That is not the power position. What you want to do is you want to have the investors coming to you, right? You want them to be begging to get into your round. How do we do that? You have to create demand, right? And so this is where we use the Dream 100 strategy. So the Dream 100 strategy is basically where you figure out who your Dream 100 investors are going to be. Figure out a bunch of angels or VCs or whatever kind of investors that you're targeting based on the stage of your company. If you're under 10,000 users, you're going to target friends and family. If you're 10,000 users plus, you're going to target seed investors. And if you're 100,000 users plus, you can start going to venture capital. So how do we generate enough interest to put us in the power position? Basically, what you're going to want to do is this. You take that the Dream 100 list, you upload it to LinkedIn, right? So you go and find the investment firms on LinkedIn, and you're going to save the leads at those investment firms. Typically, there's like 3 leads per company. So you're going to have a list of about 300 investors, 3 per company, right? You got your Dream 100 list, 300 leads in that list. And then what you're going to do is this. You're going to set up an outreach campaign using an automation software. The one I love, Law Growth Machine. You can also use Instantly or Apollo. These are all these outbound softwares that can send email, etc. I love LGM because it does LinkedIn, email, and Twitter. 3 things that investors loved. So what you do is you're going to put your hook in your first message. So I usually set up a sequence of like 4 to 5 outreach messages. And it will outreach to them on LinkedIn. It'll add them as a connection. Then it'll send them an email. And then it'll send them another message on LinkedIn. And it does that until they respond. What you're going to put into that message, the first message, is going to be your hook. So, hey, we just hit 10,000 downloads and we have a CAC to LTV ratio of 4. Our app is blowing up. Are you investing right now? That might be your hook message. And that's pretty similar to a lot of the messages that I've used in the past and had great success with. I'm talking about like 20, 30% response rate versus like the industry, which is like 3%. So you want to hook their attention, offer up a really exciting metric like a 4x CAC to LTV or whatever that is about your company. Maybe you have a big investor, maybe you have a big endorser or whatever. It makes your product platform exciting. Put that right in the first message. And then after you start sending messages to these Dream 100 lists or these 300 leads, you're going to start getting responses. I just launched a campaign yesterday, or not yesterday, but last week that already has like 17 investors interested in our first week, right? So if you just follow this recipe, you will get investors interested. So once you have investors interested, we target at least 20 investor introductions for a raise. That way, if we get down to the finish line with an investor and he says, hey, I want to invest, I already have 3 other investors who are at the finish line who are excited about it too. So if I get a term sheet from one, I go show it to the next one and say, hey, look, so-and-so over here from Space Whale Capital is offered up $500,000 at a 20% discount on these terms. Can you match him? They're going to be like, oh my God, there's all these other investors interested. I want to get my term sheet out. And you do the same thing to the next investor and the next investor. So what you're doing is you're pivoting from going and begging and asking, hey, can you meet with me? Can I get investment? Blah, 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 to them begging you. But you have to have pipeline. You have to have demand created for your capital raise. So the way I structure the capital raises is 30 days of outreach, 30 days of pitching, and then 30 days of closing, right? So the first 30 days, you're just sending those messages like I sent you earlier. Once you get the responses, you schedule all their appointments, all their pitches for the next month. And that way you're in the pitching mode and all you do is pitch for those 30 days. Show your deck, get them excited, and then ask them, hey, are you interested to invest? If yes, then you go to the next phase, which is the closing phase, and that's where you get your term sheets and you begin comparing term sheets and competing the investors against each other. So that strategy will put you in the driver's seat because they will be biting at the bit to get an investment if they know 3 other investors are ready to write you a check. And so you basically bid them against each other until you get one to come across the line. And that's how the smart guys do it. Call it what you want, but it works. So this strategy is what smart investors or what smart founders do. It doesn't cost anything because we're using automation to do the outreach. And it just sets you up for success, right? Who's not going to close a deal with 20 investor introductions? I can show you 100 case studies of different startups that closed on fewer investment introductions. Now, obviously, 20 might not be the end all be all for you. That's just the minimum that we shoot for. So I think you get it, but basically, you build your investor deck, outreach to the 300 investors, get your 20 intros, and then conduct that 90-day process that I told you. So this is your roadmap for scaling to 10,000, 100,000, million users, and to millions in investment. If you follow this, if you just check the boxes, you will be successful. You know what your budgets are, you know what the actions are, all you gotta do is follow it. So I hope you enjoyed this video. All I wanna hear is to just give you as much value as I can. I just wanna get you the tools to succeed here. So I hope this was helpful. If so, let me know, love to hear about it, and I'll see you soon.